But I'll set the scene. It was dusk, and I was walking to the convenience store with my ex-wife, and we were in Springfield, Oregon, and we were just like going on a nighttime walk or whatever. And then on the right side of us, we see this like orange kind of like fireball thing. It kind of looked like it was made out of magic. And it was like glowing and really weird, and it was about the size of a car, and it was flying just over like the telephone poles and over the houses. And we just like watched it cruise by at about 30 miles an hour, and it just went over the horizon. And that was it.
Hi, I'm Kat, and I'm the Seeker half of the Seeker and The Skeptic. So today I'm very excited to share with you a conversation between my co-host, Rebecca, the skeptic, and the artist, Mark Rogers. Mark is somebody whose paintings, I think, really well sum up the kind of vibe that we try to get across with the Seeker and the Skeptic. He paints a world that is alive with these interesting kinds of characters, from aliens who eat gold to three-eyed cats and everything in between, and basically all the kinds of characters that we like to investigate. So for our next interview, I'm going to be back to interviewing a skeptic. And if you haven't checked out our previous interviews yet, I really recommend you do so. And you can find all of the links on our YouTube channel. Just search for The Seeker and the Skeptic, or just scroll back through your podcast app. In our regular Seeker and the Skeptic episodes, Rebecca and I explore all sorts of fringe topics, from angels to ayahuasca. And you can find more information about that at seekerandskeptic.com. We're also on the social medias. Just look for @SeekerSkeptic on Twitter and Instagram. We hope that this conversation will inspire you to talk to somebody who's on the other side of the Seeker or the Skeptic divide.
Hi, Mark. Welcome to the Seeker and the Skeptic.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
It's really, really lovely to have you. I've been a fan of your art for a while, since you started following our Instagram account, and obviously you've got to go look and see who the people are who follow you. So I go over and I'm just amazed by what I see. It's just really beautiful work. So for our listeners, just what do you do? What do you call yourself? Like a surrealist, or I don't know?
Yeah, I'm a painter, and I guess I'm like a narrative painter. The paintings that I make are kind of like fairy tale illustrations that are not really about fairies. They're more about like extraterrestrials and pioneers.
That's the
in
amazing
the American West, having experiences with them.
That's what's so cool about it. It's that juxtaposition of like the aliens, which you always think of being super sci-fi, and the kind of the American West, like prairie times, I think of it. I don't know anything about American history. Yeah. And then obviously like the lights. I don't know anything about American history, or that landscape, but there's something about that kind of flat, stark light and colors that you get across. Is just really beautiful. I recommend everyone, in fact, whilst you're listening, just pop over to Mark's Instagram or just Google image his stuff, and you'll see what we're talking about. But the reason obviously that we're chatting is because of the theme of your work, which is kind of paranormal inspired. So this is the Seeker and the Skeptic. I'm the skeptic, and that makes you a seeker.
Yeah. I think that that's safe to say.
Have you always thought of yourself as a seeker?
Yeah, I've always been really into paranormal stuff. It's pretty much outside of painting and maybe heavy metal. It's pretty much the only other stuff I care about.
So like from childhood, or?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And that word, seek, is a really interesting word. What do you feel like you're seeking? What are you getting out of the world of the paranormal?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Well, I was raised Catholic, and maybe that has like a little bit to do with it, because Catholicism has like some paranormal elements in it, and I'm not personally Catholic right now or anything, but I would like to just be able to see paranormal elements happening, just so that I know that there's more to life than just like capitalism and consumerism and just like going to the grocery store and trying to make sure that my bank account is balanced and stuff like that. I want there to be magic in the world, so it's awesome. I don't know.
So is that kind of like that kind of spiritual, I guess you could call it, uplifting that you get from these sort of topics? Something like that, like an expansion of reality? Am I sort of catching it a bit?
Yeah, I guess so. I want there to be more to life than just what we see.
And
than just, yeah, sorry.
So do you think the kind of the aliens and the UFOs, all this stuff that you see in your work, is it something that you're sort of bringing into life by painting it, or is it something you think is literally true about the world?
Oh no, definitely not. That's just something I totally make up. Well, I mean, I'm okay. That's a big can of worms.
Open it.
Okay, so how I feel about aliens is, I mean, I do follow UFOlogy and all of that stuff. I think that that's super fun. I listen to a shitload of like paranormal podcasts, and I watch Ancient Aliens, and like,
it's one of my favorite shows. Yeah,
it's so great.
Yeah, it's really fun.
I, like, you know, and I've read a lot of the books. I remember when I was a little kid, my parents or my dad had like those Time Life books about, you know, just like aliens and werewolves and vampires and like everything. And I got really into that, and so I've always been, you know, following all the alien stuff. But as far as like translating that to my work, it's totally different. I get a lot of like questions about that kind of stuff, like, are you painting a specific incident that happened? And no, not really. Like, what I do with my art is I kind of think of the aliens more as just like elves or just random characters that I'm making up, like a mysterious monster fantasy character, and I have like their own kind of mythos sort of going on in my head too. So I just like exploring that and seeing where it's going.
So so do you not think that aliens exist in real life at all, or just the sort of aliens that you're drawing don't exist?
Oh, I'm sure they exist, but just the parallel between like my art and
I see. Okay, yeah.
It's separate a little bit. I mean, it's inspired by that, but it has really very little to do with that.
So aliens... so you're not actually sitting there and painting out in the prairies, capturing real events as they happen. That's disappointing to many of your fans, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm also not like on watching Ancient Aliens and then painting the actual like case studies or like whatever that happened too. I'm just making stuff up. But or am I channeling some sort of being? I'm getting a cosmic download and I'm just painting what they're telling me to paint. I don't know.
So I reckon, I mean, we talked about this a bit in our episode on ufology and Rendlesham Forest. I think it's like my position on aliens, in case you're wondering, is I reckon they're probably out there too. But what I'm skeptical of is the idea that they've visited Earth. What do you think about that?
Maybe I'm open to the possibility. I don't have the paperwork in front of me right now or like the video evidence, but I did have one. I have seen a UFO. Have you?
Really? Tell me.
I mean, I don't know if it was like an alien or anything like that. I don't know if it was from space or what it was, but it was definitely an unidentified thing. It was in 2009, and I was walking down the street, and I wasn't really prepared for it. I mean, if you're gonna have like a weird paranormal experience, I would like somebody to just be like, hey, stop what you're doing right now. This is going to be
A
weird.
strange mist comes down. You're out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
But I'll set the scene. It was dusk, and I was walking to the convenience store with my ex-wife, and we were in Springfield, Oregon, and we were just like going on a nighttime walk or whatever. And then on the right side of us, we see this like orange kind of like fireball thing. It kind of looked like it was made out of magic. And it was like glowing and really weird, and it was about the size of a car, and it was flying just over like the telephone poles and over the houses. And we just like watched it cruise by at about 30 miles an hour, and it just went over the horizon. And that was it. And we didn't have nothing else happened. It was like almost anticlimactic, except really climactic. Like, it's not every day that you just see like a weird, like a magical, like car-sized orb just like cruise. It was like this, maybe the shape of like a mango.
Was
Just
there anyone else around? Did anyone else see it?
My ex-wife saw it, and we bought a telescope, and then we sat in the backyard all the rest of the summer, and we tried to see something cool and saw nothing. I've never seen anything awesome like that. Like in the sky again. However, it could have been one thing. It could have been like I've seen pictures of like satellites taking off. But still, this was like way weirder. So.
Yeah. I've never had anything that good. My closest encounter with a UFO was when I was a teenager, and I saw a light in the sky that was very strange. It was just weird. Like, I don't even remember it that well now, but I have to remember it because I have a scar from it. I was lying.
You have a scar from it?
Yeah. It's an implant. No, I was lying on my back, and I pointed out to my friend, and I was holding a spliff, and it fell down and caught me here. So I have a burn on my neck. But yeah, it was an unidentified flying object, but it was just unidentified by me, a teenager who didn't really know what she was talking about. So I don't take it too seriously. It's interesting how like you can see, like, lots of people have experiences where they see unidentified things in the sky. But then people, depending on their like cultural context, they leap to different conclusions. I thought it was funny that you brought up saying your characters in your paintings are like elves almost, because a lot of people will argue that those, you know, the phenomena that we see and talked about in folk tales and stuff, like about fairies, is just another explanation for the same incidents that are now happening and that we call aliens. Have you come across that idea?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm really into that idea. I think that's great. I think aliens are the American elves.
Oh, that's a really nice way to think of it. Yeah.
So I like kind of go with that. You know, all the themes are the same. I love like fairy tale stuff. I think my favorite class in college was like folklore of the British Isles. It was so hard. I'm really bad at spelling, like really bad. And all those like gods and goddesses, their names are spelled totally different like every time you read them.
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh, it was so hard, but I liked the class. But yeah, I think that aliens are, you know, the American version of that.
I just think it's funny how we have these I mean, we have stuff that we have experiences that people have had, be that lights in the sky, or that experience, again referring back to another podcast, we did an episode on sleep paralysis, and we're talking about how some people think that they're being taken by demons. So sleep paralysis, for anyone who doesn't know, is when you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't move, and people will often feel like a massive amount of fear that seems completely irrational, and feel a presence. And then sometimes they will have follow-on things where the presence actually takes them. And it's a strange, like, sleep disorder, basically, that happens particularly to people who are stressed. But culturally it's been interpreted as demons, it's been interpreted as alien abductions, and it's been interpreted more recently as like the Hat Man and the Shadow Man. And I just think it's funny how we have all these competing explanations for the experiences we have, but why do you end up landing on aliens as opposed to fairies or demons or any of those things? That seems completely cultural, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, let me say your question back to you, just so I make sure that I understand it. You're wondering whether or not the fact that we're having these same experiences, we're calling them aliens based on like where we live and the time period we're living in. Yeah, I guess I could totally get on board with that.
I'm just wondering, because then obviously there's the other explanation, which me and my skeptic friends will favor, although not to say we don't enjoy reading about all the aliens and stuff, because that is great fun, which is that, you know, it's that boring thing of like you said, maybe a satellite, or you just saw something wrong, or the sleep paralysis thing is a more obvious example where we have an actual explanation of a sleep disorder, or, you know, Chinese lanterns, swamp gas, all these things that skeptics will throw at you. So why go for the aliens instead of going for the scientific explanations? Do you think? Why are you drawn to one rather than the other?
Me, well, it's just because I love monsters, and you know, I love paranormal stuff. So
it comes back to that, like that wanting to believe something. Yeah,
too.
yeah.
I just think it's so great.
I guess I wonder whether this is linked somehow to people who are artistic. Do you think that people who are artistic are more prone to sort of going into these weird worlds and like embracing the beliefs?
Well, you're an artist.
Yeah. and
So
I'm completely normal.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, you have the show The Seeker and The Skeptic, so you're drawn to this stuff. I'm not sure what to say about that.
I was just wondering if like the very process of creativity is kind of similar in a way to like exploring the way you imaginatively explore, like, oh, what would it be like if there were aliens and what would they do? And then when you're watching Ancient Aliens, at least for me, I feel like there's something very similar going on in my brain. It's like imagine this thing, imagine that thing. Like it seems like a similar process. So if people who are really creative, I mean, if I'm right and they are similar processes, you might expect them to have more of the kind of wacky beliefs, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. I'm thinking about some of my other artist friends here in town. Yeah, I have some pretty good alien discussions and magical discussions with quite a few of my friends. And I'm not really friends with people who aren't into this stuff, actually. Like, I don't really know very much, other than maybe some of my family members. But even them, they know I'm like super into it. Like my mom will be like, hey, Mark, and she's not really into aliens and stuff, but she'll be like, hey, Mark, did you hear about the recent cattle mutilation that happened like in Eastern Oregon? We just had one. It was like kind of freaky. It was like in the papers and stuff.
Ooh, that's the grossest form of alien interference that I ever read or hear about.
This one was crazy. I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's this cattle ranch that's super huge in Eastern Oregon. Eastern Oregon's just the desert. It's not like where I live. It's just like the forest, but with a city in the middle of it. And then over there, it's the desert. And like, I can't remember how many, I'd have to relook at the article, but like nine cows were just found with like their tongues and their I think genitalia like removed, and with like a laser, and it's just kind of like with like surgical precision, and it's just weird that that anybody would even do that, or
It is
that
weird.
somebody could hold like one of these gigantic bowls still to like have that even happen. So it's just, it makes no sense.
Yeah, it's funny though, isn't it, how like you see something that looks very precise, and then we immediately think, oh, it must have been done with a laser, and then we're thinking about surgery and stuff. Like that's like kind of, we're putting our interpretation on it. Do you know? Because like all we can see is the cows missing their soft tissue.
Yeah.
That's all we know. Like it's kind of like when you say you see a UFO, and then people often say, aliens, but it's like, no, it's unidentified. And this, what we have, is a mysterious situation with a bunch of cows missing their soft tissue. I mean, I don't know much about it, but I've heard sorry to be the boring spoil sport, but that's my role in this podcast.
Oh yeah.
I've heard skeptics talk about how the reason why it's always the soft tissue is because that's what insects and stuff eat. They will just eat everything that's kind of soft and gooey on a body, and that is kind of a natural process. So if those cows died for some reason, and that's a mystery, who knows why they died, then the insects or whatever, little critters would come in and gnaw out all the soft tissue, and as soon as it gets too hard for them, for it not to be worth their while, they'll stop. So that will actually end up looking quite precise, because they know what they're doing. Insects, they're on top of shit.
Yeah, or here's another one. Maybe there's a disease that they've caught where their soft tissue just falls off and disappears, like when you yank off a lizard's tail or something.
Yeah, or maybe it was fairies.
It was definitely fairies. No, I don't know.
It's that thing again, isn't it? It's like the different interpretations that we could take, and I think the interpretation that you choose it tells you a lot about a person. And it's funny that you were saying about how like all of your friends, or like the people you're close to, minus your mum, are believing the same thing, because that's another aspect of belief that I'm starting to understand more as we research more topics for the podcast. It's like a community thing. Like you learn a language, and you have a bunch of people who are all sort of using that same language and referring, like all these little cultural conventions that go around a body, like ufology or whatever. It's not just a bunch of beliefs, it's the people who hold those beliefs as well.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. The messages that I receive online from people, because I have people sharing their UFO stories with me.
I bet, yeah.
Pretty often. And it's pretty cool. A lot of their stories are pretty intense. I mean, as far as like Seeker Skeptic and stuff, I wasn't there. I don't, but I feel that people are being pretty genuine when they're describing these experiences to me.
Yeah,
who knows what they were, but
I get that feeling generally when I talk to people who've seen UFOs. I don't think I've ever thought, oh, they're lying. Like they clearly had an experience. How we interpreted them will probably be different. But I think the actual people who are outright hoaxing, maybe they just don't speak to me. But yeah, I think they're quite rare.
Have you ever had a paranormal experience?
Oh, I've had so many. Yeah.
Oh yeah, tell me.
That's kind of my background. Yeah. All sorts of things. I've seen really unpleasant, and then part of the reason why I'm a skeptic is because I really enjoyed sort of believing all sorts of strange things when I was younger. And I was Wiccan, and I believed in magic, obviously. That's a big part of the religion. I mean, in so many ways I still am Wiccan. I still celebrate the Wheel of the Year and everything. But so I had many amazing experiences, which I now put down to sort of, I mean, you get these amazing feelings when you're doing a ritual way, like your body's on fire and you feel yourself lifting out of yourself, and it's just amazing. And I now think that's more of a psychological thing than a paranormal thing, but that doesn't mean the experience didn't happen and that it wasn't amazing. And I'm sort of drifting back into trying to find ways to access those spaces without having to believe things that aren't true now. But the other side of it, and one of the reasons why I'm a skeptic, is because I also had really negative experiences, just like really scary shit happened to me. And I think when you start believing, like, okay, so I'll give this example, and I talked about this on the podcast before, so sorry if I'm boring people, but I had this experience where I saw a sort of monster. There was this woman who lived downstairs. We lived in this really horrible flat. And she used to come up and ask for Rizzlers all the time, rolling papers. And I was on my own in the flat, and I was too scared to answer the door to her because she just seemed like there was something a bit off about her. So I just looked at her through the little peephole thing, and it was all distorted. And for a minute, she looked monstrous, and it just became this big deal in my head. And I was very, very frightened of her for a long time after that. And it sort of became, I just blew it up into this very scary incident. And that's kind of like, I feel like for many people, you can't just take the fun bits of believing, like letting your imagination go mad, without also having the bad bits of letting your imagination go mad, which is why, like, even with things that people, I mean, Kat's always saying to me, oh, what's the harm? It's just a bit of fun. It makes the world more magical and beautiful. I'm like, yeah, it does. But I mean, even when we're talking about UFOs and things, there's poor old Whitley Strieber, who has had the most horrific experiences.
Yeah, he has.
So from my perspective as a skeptic, I'm like, there might be lots of people having fun with these beliefs, but then you have people like Whitley Strieber who's traumatized, and because he thinks he had an experience of being raped by this horrible, like, alien monster. Just terrible things happen to him. So it's like, I think often the dark side of all this stuff isn't acknowledged, and that kind of worries me. But it's very informed by my own experience.
Did you feel as if the person on the other side of the whole people was like demonically possessed or something? Or do you think that they were actually just like straight up a monster? Or like what was your feeling?
No, I think I thought she was a monster, and my flatmate, I don't know what was going through his mind, but I described her to him. And when I saw her through the peephole, like, my mind just made her the most horrible creature imaginable. So she had lots of arms and legs, looked kind of like a spider.
Oh,
and
whoa.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't believe I'm talking about this. And she had a swastika carved into her forehead. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
That's what my imagination is a scary place. So I told my flatmate about it, and he was like, "Oh, you saw Spider Nazi?" And I was like, "Oh no, now that's in my head. Thank you." And he said, "You got to be careful, because what she'll do is she'll sit up on the ceiling in the bathroom, and then when you come in at night, and when it's dark for a wee in the middle of the night, she'll dangle down just one leg, and then you'll reach for it thinking it's the light pole, and she comes down on you." Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God.
Yeah.
Creepy.
I don't blame him. It's a good story, but scary. So yeah, like, good things and bad things coming out of that imaginative world.
But there are like good things and bad things with just the boring old mundane world too.
That's very true. But you can't just ignore the boring old mundane world, unfortunately. It's just there. Whereas I'm doing pretty well at ignoring.
Oh, but you can just ignore the paranormal world.
Yeah. Well, I'm not doing that well. Obviously,
like
I have a whole show about it.
Yeah, totally.
So as far as like your art practice, one of the things I was really interested in, Mark recently did an interview for Kat's other show, The Creative Introvert, and you talked a bit about like how tarot informs your artistic process.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just wondering how all those like esoteric practices, how do they inspire you? How do they feed into your art?
I think meditation also plays quite a big role in that, like as far as doing like tarot and like path working meditations, where I'll kind of give myself, I'll set my insight timer or whatever.
Yeah.
I think you both use that.
Yeah, I love insight timer.
Yeah, I'll set my insight timer, but I'll like actually have like the bells timed up to kind of nudge my meditation in a direction that'll kind of start, maybe if I kind of just let go and almost kind of get dreamy, I'll start getting story ideas. And sometimes I'll use, are you a tarot person, or do you do tarot?
I dabble.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the different layered meanings of each card, and then the multiple other layer meanings when you place cards beside other cards in like some sort of a predetermined spread to help you break through any blocks or maybe give you new ideas. It's like super helpful.
Yeah, it's like I think David Bowie was famous for just cutting out random words and things from magazines and then
Oh, cool.
laying them all down on the floor and seeing what came together to inspire his songs. I think I read that somewhere about him.
Oh, that's great.
It kind of sounds like a similar sort of thing, just to shake things up.
Yeah, I'll usually have like ideas already kind of going on in the background, but then maybe there are new ideas I might not be aware of. And like I'm able to, it's either like I'm tapping into my subconscious or I'm just realizing an idea that I could maybe work with. It's a new idea. As far as, you know, that all being magical or esoteric, you know, maybe there's a little bit of that going on. You know, maybe there's a little bit of, you know, external stuff, or maybe it's just all purely psychological. I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess as far as like straight up belief goes, without any proof, you know, like just straight up seeker stuff, I guess I do believe in like a collective consciousness for no reason. I don't have any like paperwork that or like statistical studies that show that this is like a thing. But, you know, I guess there have been, you know, some of the studies that like remote viewing studies that were done at Stanford, I guess, in the 70s. I don't know.
What does it mean? I'm always interested in asking this question. What does it mean? Like when you say belief, what does that, like, how do you define the word belief?
I define belief as, oh gee, that's a great question.
It's really tricky, isn't it? Sorry to throw it at you.
They're almost like, okay, just off the cuff right now, I almost think I need to like sit and chill with that for a bit. But off the cuff, I almost think that there are like two types of beliefs. There's one like where you have all the data that's like backing it up, or like stuff that you know, you've got all this information and you can just like come to a conclusion. Like I know you're also vegan.
Yeah.
So like that's a belief for me. And I've like had all the research and I've had like personal experience with eating that diet, and I know that that's right for me. And then there's also the other kind of belief where you're just like, yeah, I don't have any fucking information about it. I am not making any logical leap. I'm just saying like, yeah, I believe that.
I think it's one of the things that gets me into trouble generally talking to seekers is that everyone has a different definition of belief, but we're all using the same word. It's so frustrating because to me, like the first group of things you were talking about, like stuff that you've seen the data for, or that is sort of like this table is here and this microphone is here, that sort of thing. I'd put that down into more like knowledge. Like I know that's definitely true.
Yeah, maybe that's better.
And then the second group of stuff, let's just get rid of the word belief entirely, is stuff that I don't really know, but I would really like it to be true. Something like that. Or I sort of have a sense an intuition. So maybe that could be more like, it's kind of dangerous to use this word because it's religious, but faith, maybe? Faith versus knowledge?
Sure.
Or like maybe there's a spectrum, there's this word belief and it goes on a spectrum from knowledge to faith, and then everything is somewhere in between.
Yeah, definitely. I was kind of putting that on there. Maybe like well, I don't know. I really believe in the collective consciousness. Like, I mean, like my scale would be pretty high, but
So if
it's
we put
really
knowledge
not
is
backed up.
100 and pure faith is 0, give me a ballpark.
I don't really know if those can be on the same, those can be like on the same scale, actually.
Okay.
Like knowledge might need to be on a different, like a totally different thing. I can only put that on something where where there's a scale of like how much I, just believe without any proof. But I mean, I believe like almost, I would say like 90%. I believe in the collective consciousness. I believe that people have like inherent psychic abilities and they're able to like communicate and I believe that that a lot of these, that we have like some sort of like ant powers, how like ants like kind
Yeah.
of communicate and we all like kind of work together in a weird way. I believe that humans do that too, and I don't have anything that, whoa shit, I dropped the phone. But, I don't really have anything that totally backs that up.
So the reason you believe it is because
The reason why I believe it is because of stories that people have shared. I believe it because of a intuitive feeling. I believe it through like practicing tarot actually with other people, and seeing things actually play out that are just kind of spookily correct, which leads me to believe that maybe there was some sort of a transference of like thought. There's also a book that I've read quite recently by this guy named Dean Radin called Real Magic. I think that's what it's called. And they're just about like magic that's been scientifically studied. But I mean,
oh wow, that sounds good.
yeah, they were like, there were some tests where like they would have seeds that had been blessed, and then they had seeds that were just grown under the same conditions but like not blessed, and then the blessed seeds would like grow more.
Wow, that is impressive. I'll have to look into
stuff
it.
like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I can't
Oh well, me neither.
argue
But I
this
do know,
stuff
unfortunately,
as
people can like people really misrepresent science often in some books. But yeah. So, but putting that aside, the potential scientific evidence, it's the stories mainly that convince you. The stories and your sort of intuitive sense.
Yeah, the stories in my intuitive sense, and yeah.
So if you hadn't heard the stories, do you think you would still believe if you just had the intuitive sense? Or does it have to be both together?
Maybe both together. I can't really separate them because once I've already heard the story, I can't really go back and imagine life without it.
Yeah, that's the trouble. I'm just fascinated, like, because it seems like if you were going to let something go into your sort of knowledge pile of beliefs, you would probably more than intuition and stories, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So I guess that's why you're putting that in a separate pile.
Yeah.
So this leads me on to asking you about chaos magic, because this seems to be all about this kind of like, I don't know what to call it, like a disruption between the ideas of the knowledge and the belief. Like that seems to be what they're up to. I just did a little bit of research today. I made a sigil to try and make us have a good podcast. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So I don't really know much about it. Can you explain what chaos magic is to me?
I don't really know if I'd be the best person to explain it either. This is such a hard thing to explain. It's something that I'm pretty interested in. I'm reading a book right now by Phil Hine called Condensed Chaos, which is, a book about that. So I'll try.
Please do.
And hopefully your listeners, if they know, if they're more informed, then they should speak up. But so chaos magic was invented kind of in the 80s by Peter J. Carroll, and it was influenced by an artist called Austin Osman Spare, and it's less like a magical system like Wicca or the esoteric word of the Golden Dawn or Thelema or anything like that. It's more of a philosophy from what I'm gathering, and it's kind of like a DIY approach to magic where, like, what they would say is like everything or nothing is true, but everything is permitted, I think is one of their
I've heard that in my very brief research.
Yeah, so if they were going to do like some sort of a ritual to, like, let's pick a random one, like a protection ritual, they can pick from like any faith, any school of any system. Like you can just do like a full-on you can like conjure a demon, or you can conjure an angel, or you can just pretty much do anything you want. Your beliefs are just totally flexible. You can change your beliefs anytime for any reason. And it's also like kind of a philosophy, I think, too. They have like the different types of magic, like the different models of magic. Like there's the spirit model, I actually wrote this down because I always forget it, the energetic model, the psychological model, and the informational model.
Oh, interesting.
So like the spirit model, and there might be another one that I'm totally forgetting right now, but like, so the spirit model of magic would be like, you would just call on some sort of a deity, and you're like, hey, I need some cash because I need to pay my phone bill, please help me, or whatever. And then so that would be that one. The energetic model would be like, I've got all these chakras, I've got some chi, I've got some energy, I've got some crystals, let's make some magic. And then I think like a lot of magic, they'll combine like these models. But chaos magicians, I think, want to break things down and think of it in more of a skeptical term sometimes too. I think the psychological model might be a little bit more like the sigil type of magic, where you're trying to program your subconscious so that maybe like through these you're trying to program your subconscious so that you're able to affect the world in a different way. Then the informational model, it's even harder for me to describe. That's kind of the most new model, and I think that one is about like raising energy like you would in Wicca, but then programming that energy with some sort of an intent or information. And it's almost like a computer program where it just goes out into the world and it just does what it's supposed to do.
Whoa.
Based on your programming. There are also in chaos magic, there are sigilry, and there is another sort of magical idea called like a servitor. Have you encountered?
Oh, I've heard that
today?
Word, but I didn't click the link yet.
There's an egregore too. I think I'm saying that right.
Are these like tulpas?
Yes.
Okay, so like thought forms.
Yes.
You like concentrate on something existing and then it sort of starts existing, is that?
Yeah, and it takes on its own sentience. And an egregore is something that, or egregore, is something that exists within the minds of many. So that's a collective consciousness one. So if like a bunch of people got together and they all started believing and putting all of their ideas collectively into something, it becomes a sentient thing.
Wow.
And yeah, that's
I feel like some of these things could be a sort of a different way, a different language to think about memetics. You know, that idea that like there are cultural packages of ideas that sort of, they compete almost like, I think Richard Dawkins first brought it up, but Susan Blackmore is the one who sort of ran with the idea. And she talks about the idea of these packages of ideas, and she calls them memes, and then groups of them will be memeplexes, and how they compete with each other for our attention. And they're not literally competing. This is the difference. She sees it like evolution. Like some people will look at evolution and they'll think, well, it's all aiming towards creating us, these wonderful humans. But then scientists look at evolution, they say, no, it's just random chance, but it seems to have a direction from where we're sitting. And they talk about the same sort of things when they talk about memes, like these cultural packets. Like they are if you make a really catchy tune, then other people will repeat it. That's like the simplest form of a meme. And so you could say, oh, well, look how that meme is almost like got its own will, like it's trying to reproduce itself and spread. Or you could just say, well, that's how things work. That's literally like the physics of how our culture works. Like things that are catchy are promoted. And I feel like a lot of, I mean, at least the egregors, or those guys, servitors, all those guys, they sound a little bit like memes. Does that sound vaguely right?
Yeah, I would need to read a little bit more about this idea. What did you call it again? Memetics?
Yeah, memetics. I can't remember what.
I'm going to write that down. That sounds super interesting.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it really it made me understand a lot of stuff to do with the collective unconscious, because we talk about the collective unconscious a lot on the show, and it made me think, oh, I see why people have this idea. But have you actually messed around with chaos magic yourself, or are you still in the like researching phase?
I don't know if that's like something for me. It's just something I like reading about all magic. I mean, I've done sigil stuff before. I haven't had no, I had success only, like I had a pretty good success with it, like just like twice. And then, but I don't know if like the sigil stuff really speaks to me. And then as far as, so I started having like these really weird ideas where where I would think about like servitors and stuff like that. And then I was like, wait a second. Don't authors just do that all the time? Aren't they just creating characters? Isn't this all just like story based? Like, why am I giving it all this like magical names and power? And then I was like, oh wait, all, you know, all of the gods are just stories, and all the goddesses are stories, and all of this. So stories all have all this tremendous power too.
Yeah.
And you could argue that, you know, Harry Potter is a really powerful, you know, egregore, and
he's certainly on a lot of people's minds. So yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like Gandalf and stuff like that. So I guess I'm just kind of curious about the philosophy of it, and that's why I'm reading about it. Some people use servitors for various tasks, though, and I don't know if that's something that I need, but people will create a specific servitor to bring them cash, or they'll make a servitor to like protect their apartment, or to be their buddy, or like, I don't know, whatever somebody might need, you know. So people have like specific roles that they're supposed to do. Oh yeah, for healing is like another thing that I've read about. So I mean, I don't know if that's something that I need or something I ever want to work with. But
do you think it's like about changing your perception of reality, or do you think it's about actually making physical changes? So if I made a servitor and I said, go and get me cash, would it be that after making the servitor, I was more on the lookout for opportunities to make money, and that would have been a psychological transformation as a result of my ritual, and so therefore I would hopefully make the cash? Or do you think it's like the servitor literally goes out and affects the world and makes something happen that otherwise wouldn't have happened and bring money to me? I guess it's like the psychological explanation versus the realist explanation or something.
I would say that that like as far as like models of magic, like that are talked about in chaos magic, you've got the psychological model definitely working. You're going to program yourself a little bit to be more receptive to seeking cash in like some different ways that you might not have been aware of, but it might be like you might have programmed your subconscious a little bit to make that happen. And you might be with like law of attraction stuff, you might be putting that intent out in the world so that you might be more so that might come back to you a little bit more. I would say it's mainly psychological for just what I would believe, just without the unfaith belief. I would say it's mainly psychological with like a little bit of that other stuff.
It's funny you bring up the law of attraction, because the whole time I was reading about this, I was just like, oh, is this just the law of attraction? But like, cool. It's like the law of attraction with the kind of punk rock ethos.
Yeah, I guess so.
There are loads of similarities,
I forgot
right?
to mention, chaos magic is punk or something too. Yeah, we forgot to mention it's punk rock.
Well, it's got the whole DIY thing that's kind of punk,
Yeah.
and then all just the aesthetic of it. And it's coming up at the same time, right? You said the 80s.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. Maybe that's why it's coming back as well, because we're kind of seeing a revival of stuff that was big in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, I just like reading about all the different forms of magic and stuff like that. I just think it makes my life happier. Not in the sense that I'm like having success with all this magic, but I just like it.
Yeah. It's funny.
It makes my life happier.
It's funny how when you said about the gods and goddesses and how they're just stories, I think that we have generally a culture that massively devalues all of art, basically. I mean, obviously I think that I'm an artist, you're an artist, like people don't value us enough, but whenever I give some boring, skeptic explanation for something, everyone's like, oh, you're saying it's just a story. I'm like, no, I'm saying it's a story. Like, stories are amazing. Why does it have to be just a story? And I wonder whether some of the urge to say this is magical, to add on the extra bit of magic, is because as a culture we devalue narrative. Like, if we celebrated story, maybe we wouldn't feel the need to sprinkle the little bit of extra magic on top. I don't know.
Well, I can't remember what book I was reading, but one of these various occult authors mentioned something that magic was like, you're like watching a sunset, and you could say that it's the colors are created by the sun going through the atmosphere, like certain angles and blah blah. But what's magic about it is the fact that you're seeing this and you become personally moved by it, and it makes you feel a certain way, or that like you're listening to a song and you're just like taken back, or you just like look at a beautiful painting and you're just like moved somehow. That's magic. Versus like, or I mean, even just a painting is kind of magic too, because all it really is just like pigments put on like a piece of wood, just like, that's all it is. But then you actually but then you also are like looking at a picture, and maybe the picture has like a story into it too. So like all of that. So that's like magic versus, it's almost like you take it for granted all the time.
Yeah.
That it's actually there. So.
Yeah, I seem almost like, I mean, investigating all of these things that we do, I just see so much creativity and exploration, and it's really inspiring and beautiful, and I don't have to believe it's true to enjoy it.
Yeah,
that's the stage I'm at now, until we cover something that is really like harmful, and then I'll get all my angry skeptic hat back on.
or maybe it was true to like another person, like all these like a lot of these alien encounters that I'm having, or that not that I'm having, but that I'm that are being told to me from that other people are having. You know, I can just enjoy the fact that the stories were true to that person, the person that was sharing it with me. So
yeah, I think you're really lucky to be getting all these stories. I would love to be in your position. That must be really exciting to open up your inbox.
It's kind of, yeah, it's pretty cool and trippy, and yeah.
So as you know, we have a mixture of skeptics and seekers in the audience, and since you're playing the seeker this evening, do you have any advice for skeptics? Like, is there anything that you think sometimes that would make our lives better, or would make us better at speaking to people who aren't skeptics? Or
Whoa, that's an intense question.
I try to make all my questions
for
intense.
yeah, advice for skeptics on how to be more open to the possibility of
anything. Like, what do you think? I mean, if you had a friend in your life who was a hardline skeptic, and you thought, you know, maybe you could pass on some wisdom, what would it be?
Well, I think that I don't know, the psychological model might be the gateway to the psychological model of magic might be the gateway to other erroneous beliefs or other far out ideas. I'm not really sure, but
No, I think that is a really good place to start, because that is exactly what I ended up looking into today, googling chaos magic, and I was like, oh, okay, there's a place in my life maybe for some of this ritual and for some of this sort of stuff. And I wouldn't have thought that if I hadn't seen it presented as in, like, you are priming yourself, that using the science words, you know, the science words I like, you're priming yourself to experience these sort of things. Like, that makes sense. Priming's a thing. I mean, I don't know if it's, I just said priming is a thing, and then I just thought, oh no, I just recently read an article about how the studies don't replicate. But anyway, it's plausible. It's a plausible thing.
Or just the fact that we have imaginations. You know, you could say that, like, well, you don't actually have an imagination. What you have are a series of chemical interactions within your brain that are caused by like external stimulus and the food you ate, and you know, just your reactions to different things. But then at the same time, you have your imagination, and you're able to control some of your, you know, just through being aware of what you're thinking and feeling at all times, and observing your thoughts from a distance, like through meditation and stuff like that. You're able to just think about how you're thinking. And isn't that just magic to begin with too? Like, I mean, it's just pretty cool. So I don't know, just the fact that we have imaginations and is a pretty good start, maybe.
Yeah, and I also, it's like a thing that we don't talk about as grown-ups that often. I mean, maybe in artistic spaces we do, but in, you know, in normal office life or whatever, I don't know what normal life's like, but I imagine they don't celebrate imagination as much as artists do. So I definitely think that's something that skeptics could work on for sure. That's brilliant. That's great advice. So, well, thank you ever so much for coming on the show. It's been a really fascinating chat, and you've left me with lots to think about.
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca. This has been fun.
I hope you enjoyed that. You can find Mark online. Just go to markrogersart.com, and you can also follow him on Instagram, which I highly recommend, at markrogersart. And if you want to be kept up to date with all the latest Seeker and the Skeptic episodes, well then why not subscribe? Maybe that's on our YouTube channel. Just look for Seeker and the Skeptic, or on our podcast. Just look for Seeker and Skeptic on your podcast app of choice. And you can also find us on social media. We're on Instagram and Twitter at Seeker Skeptic. And we really appreciate this if you share the episode with a friend. Maybe it's somebody on the other half of the Seeker and the Skeptic divide who might be interested in these conversations. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.